Greetings, everyone. We are live again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Uhuru. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I just want to thank you all for the support. It really means a lot. Again, thank you all for the support. Thank you for being part of the Search for Uhuru family. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe as you come to the chat room. Again, please like, share, and subscribe as you come to the chat room. Also, make sure you go to dynastymirror.com. Tour, April 21st to the 30th. We are going to Sierra Leone, April 21st to the 30th. We are going to Sierra Leone. So come and join us in Sierra Leone. We're going to have a trip of a lifetime. We have a lot planned. And guess what? Originally, it was April 21st to the 30th. Well, we leave on the 21st, arrive in Sierra Leone on the 22nd, then leave on the 29th, come back to the States on the 30th. But we're going to move it up a day. So April 20th, we're leaving April 20th, so we can have an extra day, and it's at no additional cost. So, come and kick it with us in Sierra Leone. What else here? Patreon, become a monthly Patreon. Everyone, again, please become a monthly Patreon. And yeah, I think that's it for the announcements. Without further ado, we have Brother Ebube Okoli on with us today. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing, and Ebube is a master at what we're going to be discussing today in regards to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, how that's a win for Africa, or it might not be a win for Africa. I don't know. Ebube's he'll be able to break it down and, how I guess Europe and the West, how they're viewing this, if this is something that they really want to happen. And is this Africa Continental Free Trade Area even going to happen? Because, we were talking about the the dollar, and I've been back and forth to Africa in the last month. I have not seen one echo, but I see a bunch of Safa and Naira and Salone and, a Leon and the Gambia and Delasi, but I see no echo. So, I don't know. And Ebube, introduce yourself. Shout out your page too, guys. Make sure you go subscribe to Brother Ebube's YouTube page, Up Close and Centered. Go and subscribe to that as well. I'll put the link in the chat room. But introduce yourself, Ebube. And let's start with the echo for a quick second, because I'd like to know I haven't seen that one echo since I've been. But go ahead.
All right, my name is Ebube Okoli. I'm a Nigerian-born, American-trained attorney and geopolitical analyst. I'm also the host of Up Close and Center, as Dinah shouted it out. It's a channel here on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you head on over and subscribe. You're there because the logo looks like this, Up Close and Center, white lettering, black logo. And it's good to see everybody. Happy New Year to everybody. Now, you brought up an interesting point in regards to the echo. Now, for those who don't know, there's a body that comprises 15 West African member states called ECOWAS. It's the Economic Community of West African States. Essentially, they've been working towards regional integration historically, most of West Africa has always been united or connected economically, politically, whether in the days of ancient Mali, ancient Ghana, the Sokoto Caliphate. There's been large empires that have spanned various countries in West Africa. So it's natural for the present day West African nations to form into ECOWAS. Now, along with that, there was, and there still is, a regional currency that was being planned. Now, there were two different visions for the regional currency. One vision was the external vision, we'll call it that, the vision that had a lot more input, if you will, from foreign nations. And then there was the version that was more indigenous, more regional to West Africa, and most likely would have satisfied the needs of the West African sub-region. That one, to an extent, was being chaired and pushed by Nigeria. So that was the one being pushed within the region. Outside of the region, you have to remember that the certain West African nations have pre-existing ties to France, and France, to an extent, controls their monetary system through the Central African franc. And if you haven't checked out that episode, you should head over to Up Close and Center when you have some time and check over France and Africa. I go over that in great detail. So essentially, that was one of the things that a lot of analysts say has succumbed to external pressure and has become a tool that is actually being more influenced from the outside than it is from the inside. So a lot of the English-speaking West African countries, to an extent, have pulled back because it didn't match the vision they initially had for that currency. And so you have to still remember there were convergence criteria that needed to be met in order for those nations to adopt the currency anyway. So they can take their time and not really push or put those at the forefront, thus delaying implementation of the currency, since it doesn't fit in line with the original vision those nations had for the currency system.
All right, cool, guys. Hit that like button. Again, hit the like button. And let's jump into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So now there was amongst the ECOWAS countries, I believe, the Africa or the ECOWAS Free Trade. I know Nigeria played a major part in it. It was another free day. It's already been a couple free trade areas, Ebube, now, but I'm guessing this one's going to be all of Africa. So can you explain the ones that are already kind of in place but aren't really I don't know if they're really enforced? Because I know at one time before coronavirus, Nigeria had closed down its borders, and it stopped rice imports. And a lot of people were saying, well, we have this free trade agreement amongst, I believe it was ECOWAS countries or a number of countries. And so a lot of people were upset. So can you kind of explain the free trade areas amongst or agreements amongst African countries that we have now, and with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that is, I think it started January 1st. Yeah, exactly. And how that is working.
All right, so I'll explain a few concepts before we jump totally into it. But yes, and in regards to the rice and it was just the land borders. You could still bring things in through the ports, and part of the problem was Nigeria was experiencing security situations where people were bringing weapons from some of the Sahelian states into Nigeria and smuggling other things in through the land borders. So in order to step up safety measures, the government said anything that comes into the country has to come in through one of the ports. Okay. So they didn't necessarily close their borders to trade, but certain types of trade may have been more expensive than it's worth to move it that way. So essentially it did halt land trade, but it didn't completely close the nation. And part of that was to grow the indigenous rice. And at the end of the day, you need self-sufficiency. Nigeria at one point was self-sufficient in rice. Some situations happened where money had to be allocated to other things. It wasn't allowed to be allocated to infrastructure and agriculture, and certain other policies came around, especially with the SAP structural adjustment. But that's another issue in and of itself. We'd be here for a few hours discussing that. Mm-hmm. But essentially, a lot of African nations want to get back to self-sufficiency, and some are taking different roads, such as closing land borders. All right, so now in regards to ECOWAS has free movement of people, meaning that I can go to Abuja, get my passport, the ECOWAS passport, and it gives me access to 15 nations without having to get a visa. So I can go into those nations as if I was a citizen of those nations. So West Africa is essentially integrated in regards to movement of people. And there are people who live in Nigeria and work in Cameroon, people that live in Niger Republic and work in Nigeria, people that live in Chad and come into Nigeria every so often, and the like. So because they have brothers and ethnically they're the same people on different sides of that border. So West Africans are integrated like that. So free movement of people isn't guaranteed in all aspects. Meaning that if you say, you know what, we're not allowing people across the land border, you have to come in through one of the ports, then you've essentially made it more difficult for them to do their trades, but you haven't completely stopped it. Now, in regards to the free African, the agreement that came into place this January, in regards to that, this is actually pretty big, right? This is actually pretty big. You got 55 members, you have 1.3 billion people that this covers, which is massive. You have $4.5 trillion worth of GDP. You have a lot that's covered in this area. So what happens is essentially the borders have been lifted off between the African nations. Now, there's three things that we have to discuss in regards to that trade agreement. We have to discuss the problem, right, mm-hmm. that it was meant to fix, because it's really just a solution to a long-standing problem, right? And it's just a solution, meaning that it may or may not fix the problem, but we'll talk about the problem in just a second. The next thing is the potential benefits. What are the benefits of implementation. And then the third thing we'll talk about are the challenges, because there's a lot of challenges. Once again, this is just implementation of a solution to a long-standing problem that the African continent has had. And it's a good solution if implemented properly. But let's talk about the problem. All right, so we're just going to look at numbers. If we look at numbers, Africa has about 20% of the workforce of the planet, but only about 3.2% of global GDP. So you have 20% of the workforce on this planet, but only just around 3% of the global GDP. That means you have a lot of people fighting for a small amount of money. Now, why are they fighting for such a small amount of money? It's not that these African nations don't have wealth or resources. The problem is that there's no added value. So when you don't add value to the products, and as a side note, and I've spoken about this before, what makes a nation rich and what makes a nation poor? Poor nations merely export unfinished, unprocessed raw materials. What makes a nation rich is processing your raw materials before you send them off. So rather than Ghana exporting cocoa, Ghana would export chocolate bars, which means that they have to have packaging facilities, they have to have processing facilities, they have to have sophisticated logistics to move around everything. And you're creating, and every one of those steps, you're creating a larger tax base for the government to collect and have a stronger presence, stronger revenue. More people are involved. There's more money involved. And at the end of the day, you're selling a product for 20 times more than what you were selling it before as raw cocoa. But if you don't do that, you see how you end up with just 3% of the global GDP with 20% of the workforce and endless resources. So essentially, the problem is that there's no added value. And because there's such a gap there, what's happening is that we're exporting raw materials at very low costs. And at most, we're employing people to climb up and cut something down, dig something out of the ground, put it on a truck, take it to a port. And we have to remember that Africa has never truly, in the modern era been connected. When the colonists came, they essentially set up all the infrastructure in every nation was set up. Like, for example, if there was a railroad built, the railroad would be built in Enugu to extract coal, and the rails would be taken to Port Harcourt, right?
Right.
Resources, port, export them outside of the country. So most of the expensive foundational infrastructure for most African nations that were colonized were set up to merely extract unprocessed raw materials from the nations. And then essentially, when these nations were given independence, they were given independence on top of an infrastructural foundation that didn't really horizontally link the nations with each other. Mm-hmm. They more so linked the nations with their former colonial overseers, if you will. Right. So now, and there was economic expediency to just continue using the infrastructure as it is in the same way that you normally used it for, and oftentimes to the same people who were there during colonialism. So it's almost like the same system stayed there because the hard infrastructure. So it took African nations, they had to go out of their way to go ahead and potentially build a rail line from Lagos to Accra or connect different nations. And we have to realize Africa is like, you have very connected regions and a very disconnected continent. So now the regions are pretty connected. West Africa is pretty connected. There's a highway you can essentially take through most West African states, starting from Nigeria, going all the way up. So they're somewhat connected. East Africa is connected. Kenya, Tanzania, to an extent, Ethiopia, Burundi, Uganda, all those places. Southern Africa, Northern Africa, of course. All the regions are connected, but there's not really connection between the regions, which is the hardest part, is to actually connect the regions. To get to East to West Africa is very difficult. For example, through Congo, you don't really have a lot of through roads or through railroads. It created a situation where it's easier for someone in Kenya to get a product from Japan or China rather than getting that same product from the DRC or Cameroon, which is geographically closer. But so now you have the lack of infrastructure. All right, so now we see the problem. We have the problem of the value added is low. It's not high. It should theoretically at least match the percentage of the global workforce. In regards to it not doing that, you're going to have a situation where there's poverty. You're going to have a situation where there's lack. You're going to have a situation where the living standard is actually very low. So, alas, you see those problems. And here comes the African Free Trade Agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We'll just call it the Free Trade Agreement to keep things simple. So now you have this agreement that's coming in that's saying, okay, all it is an opportunity. There's nothing guaranteed with this piece of, we'll call it legislation, if you will. That's how we have to look at it. It's merely a piece of legislation. It's just a tool that someone can, in the hands of a wise carpenter, can be used to do something great. So now what it's saying is this. Almost all tariffs are being removed. So let's say that rather than buying prefabricated clothes from China, there was a time when Kaduna, a city, an area in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, that was really good at textiles and manufacturing clothes. So a lot of the clothes that Africans wore in the past, and not too distant past, were made by Africans. And then we had a weird situation where clothes that were coming in from other nations were essentially being dumped into the country from China, and they were coming at a very cheap price. So the hundreds of thousands of people in the textile industry and the cotton, because there's a lot of cotton and they're very skilled artisans. And a lot of people think, Africans don't wear clothes, but we've had a very sophisticated fashion industry, if you will, for thousands of years. Right. So much so that you can look at somebody, for example, in Nigeria, wear their native wear, and you can almost tell what region of the country that they came from, because it's the fashion is just so diverse, even within Nigeria. You have so many different styles. So now, for example, let's say there's no tariff on Kaduna textiles, kaftans being made. And Kaduna can find a way to produce these effectively and cheaply. Every kaftan you see in West Africa has the potential to say made in Kaduna, because if they can find a way to get it cheaper, they're essentially being able to move it for free into other nations. So what the trade agreement is essentially giving is an opportunity for nations and regions to say, you know what, let me go ahead and step my game up. Let me go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and become the manufacturer of this, and we're first going to dominate the region. And once we're dominating the region and bringing the wealth within the region, we're going to go ahead and figure out how to connect up all these regions. And within East Africa, you're going to have the same thing in that region. So essentially, it's just competition. It's saying rather than giving this $4.5 trillion economy, rather than letting unfettered access to outsiders, how about we now say, for anybody in this continent who wants to compete economically, let's let them go ahead and compete.
Shout out to O'Shea Duke Jackson. I think this is going to be a big game changer for bigger countries like Nigeria and South Africa, but the smaller countries will have a hard time. What are your thoughts on that?
All right, first shout outs to O'Shea Duke Jackson out there sandling it up as usual.
Yeah.
In regards to now statistically that may be right. Statistically that may be right. The larger companies, the larger countries may just dominate the smaller countries. But at the same time, would you rather be giving your money, if you're in, for example, Burkina Faso, would you rather be giving your money to someone outside of the African continent for your clothing needs, or would you rather be giving it to a fellow African, your neighbor? And here's the good thing. Circulating your dollar within your community, within your economic community, makes you better, because even if that money is going to your neighbor, you're creating a stronger neighbor in the region. And here's how it's going to work. You have to remember that there's several levels. When you run a nation or a country, there's several levels and several ways in which you can win if you're the small fish. Not every nation is going to be big and powerful. Some other nations are going to be, to an extent, dominated by larger nations. But here's the real thing. The free trade agreement is just a step. It's just a step in a very larger goal. The larger goal is this. It's to essentially make the smaller nations actually matter and have more power in the world, say. Because eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be one African trade minister. And when I say minister, I don't mean anything with the church. I mean more like when they say secretary of state, it's not necessarily a secretary. The terms secretary and minister are interchangeable depending on which nation you're in. But essentially, Africa is just going to have one trade minister and one trade policy, which means that if you're a small nation, a very small nation of less than 10 million people, when your nation trades or discusses with China, your nation is part of a larger conglomerate. You're discussing as the African nation. I mean, so imagine you're a smaller nation and let's say Nigeria has a really good deal and this nation doesn't. When the African trade minister goes to China, they're going to demand the best for the whole continent. They're going to demand we get this deal for everybody. So smaller nations that might not have been able to flex themselves and flex their muscles will now be able to benefit. So smaller nations might not benefit directly because of economies of scale, but there's Jamaica. It's a population of under 5 million. It's a nation of under 5 million. There was a long time in the world where people still are enjoying reggae music. A whole subset of music was dominated by a nation of under 5 million, right. A planet of billions. So just because you're a small nation doesn't mean that you can't dominate your sector if you have a competitive advantage. So every nation essentially is going to have to flex their competitive advantage, and it's economics. Economics isn't pretty. There are winners and there are losers. However, we're just now saying we're going to keep some of the winners on the African continent. And this is going to encourage nations to do the thing that's going to address the problem. The problem is that we need to add value to the products in Africa. So now if a Hershey's bar from Ghana is able to come into Nigeria tariff-free and be able to just easily come into the country, we'll let it come. Let the Ghanaians take over the Nigerian chocolate market. Other nations have flooded us with chocolate and our money goes to them. What's wrong with Ghanaians if they have that competitive advantage taking over that sector of the economy? I don't see any problems with it. So in regards to the benefits are massive. The benefits are massive because once the regions are strong, they're naturally going to connect and bridge the infrastructural interconnectivity gap that we've had in Africa for quite some time. So now we have to get to the challenges. This is going to be the interesting part. Of course, there's going to be challenges. There are nations who have had unfettered access to the African economy for the last 120 years. Right. Do you think you're just going to want to give that up?
Of course not. Of course not.
A lot of them have political leverage with their former colonies. So that's the challenge, because right now, Africa is essentially saying, guys, let's give ourselves the opportunity to take some of our economy back. That's all this is. It's an opportunity. Anyone on the continent who can beat what they're doing outside, you will get the green light. So now nations outside are going to naturally want to stop that because it's going to cut into their pockets.
Right.
It's interesting to see how Africa is going to overcome that. Now, there's also going to be internal threats too, because there may be smaller nations who say, you know what, it was better when the European powers were getting all this money. I don't know if I like the fact that Ethiopia or Kenya is dominating this particular sector. For example, who's to tell if Ethiopian Airlines doesn't essentially become the African carrier, right?
I mean, for the most part, Ethiopian Airlines is already the African carrier.
Yeah, so the thing is, they look like the natural heir apparent. They look like the person that's naturally going to take that position. There may be some nations that might not like that. So they may work with outsiders to potentially try and sabotage that from happening. So you're always going to have inside people. You're always going to have conflict from inside as well as outside. So the last challenge, essentially, is the entrenched corruption. Allegedly, there's a lot of corruption at borders, and there are people who these tariffs go directly into their accounts, allegedly. And I can't speak for everybody because there are some very honest people that work at these African borders, and there are some very unscrupulous people. I don't have a list of who is who, so I don't want to judge a whole segment or a population. But I will say there have been strong allegations in the past that some of these border agencies actually enjoy and prefer for some of these tariffs to be there in order to line their pockets. So that you don't know exactly how many millions or potentially billions is being made through that back door, and you're now talking about closing that loophole. There may be entrenched corruption to work against that. So these are three challenges that we see readily on hand in regards to proper implementation. And that's just at a very high level. That's not digging in through the weeds.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. We have guys. We're going to open up the phone lines. If you'd like to call in, send me an email at uhuru@searchforuhuru.com. Again, uhuru@searchforuhuru.com. There's a lot of questions in the chat room. Come on and let's continue the conversation. Let's see here. We had a statement. Let's hear. Ebube, aren't you concerned about Chinese companies flooding our market with cheap products?
That's always a concern, but here's the issue. There's a regulatory framework being set up, which is actually pretty good. So the regulatory framework is going to have to deal with that. We're just going to have a strong institution that's able to lean against that and prevent that from happening. Already, there are certain things being set up. So, for example, there are, if you will, complaint lines. Like this is essentially going to be headquartered in Ghana. Ghana has really taken the lead in regards to physical structures and headquarters and things like that. I believe the transfer of this particular segment is being done this year. And so there's already, for example, if I'm a trader in Nigeria and you're a trader in Cameroon, and there are issues that we have, or I'm facing issues with government regulations, I can go ahead and contact them, and they'll give me a timetable for when they're going to deal with that to make sure that this nation is compliant with the agreement. So it's things like that where you have institutions that deal with the actual issue. And also, too, here's something that's actionable for anybody watching in the Diaspora. Now, there's also going to be a registry. The name eludes me at the moment right now, but there's going to be a registry where nations will upload the information of what they import and what they export, and who they're exporting it to and who they're importing it from. So, for example, Kenya might export something to Tanzania, but then through the registry, they realize, and this is going to be all public, anybody can get into it. Let's say you realize that there's something in Nigeria that's being exported and it's in abundance and it's really hotly needed right now in Tanzania. A smart entrepreneur is going to say, you know what? If I'm not Nigerian myself, let me partner with somebody in Nigeria. Or if I'm an African national from anywhere in the country, let me potentially move to Nigeria, set up something where this is being processed, and we can go ahead and figure out a way to get it to Tanzania. Mm-hmm. So the government isn't going to try and do everything. It's creating spaces for the private sector. So African Americans, this would be something good for those of the diaspora in this particular country. If they've ever wanted to partner up with any Africans to do any potential business, this is going to be a huge opening where for the first time, there's going to be something that wasn't there before, which is information, direct information on what African nations need, what they're sending out, and what they're bringing in.
All right, let's see here. Guys, hit that like button. Also, if you'd like to call in and ask a question, uhuru@searchforuhuru.com is the email. uhuru@searchforuhuru.com is the email. Send me an email, and I will send you the link, and you can call in and ask your question. Let's see what else we have here in the chat room. But how can we protect this trade with no military? Y'all really think the West will allow their moneymaker off their suffering, do its own thing?
All right. If you've checked out my channel, I do have something called Africa and our military. It raises a few key points. The main issue in Africa is we spend far too less on weapons, if you will. And the money we do spend, we buy all those weapons externally from the same nations who could be potentially enemies. So now if you look at, for example, some nations, like in Asia, the Japanese, for example, they only needed one gun. When the Europeans came, they said, you know what? That thing you have, that gun, let me have that. And the Europeans like, all right, great, you can have this one gun. You know what the Japanese did with it? They broke it apart and built thousands of them. So the next time when the Europeans came back, they were shocked. These people this many weapons. So they focused on indigenous innovation. That's it. Africa, there was a time, Africans, we produced everything we needed. Right now, unfortunately, we're leaving a lot open for others to produce for us, including our weapons, which at the end of the day isn't smart. So 3 things we need to do in Africa, every African nation. 1, increase military expenditure, focus on indigenous innovation. That's the first thing. 2, reduce corruption. A lot of the money spent on military isn't properly spent, allegedly. I can't castigate anybody, but these are just the allegations. And then lastly, start channeling the money back into research and development programs to at least produce the basics, rifles and AKs and everything else that you need. You need the basics. So in regards to Africa, yeah, Africa needs to definitely step it up in regards to military expenditure and having weapons, because anything good needs good defenses. You can't build a robust economy, get to the point where you wield power in the world, and then you don't have any hard power, just soft power. You're a sitting duck.
Okay. I sent the link out to Brother Lamine, and then let's see here, Brother Darren. I'm about to send you the link right now, and you could call in. See what else we have here in the chat room. There's another question I wanted to get to. Let's see here. I am concerned about these multinationals. I don't know where that is coming from, but what are your thoughts on that statement?
Well, it depends. That's a very broad statement, but I'll assume that he means that you don't want to open up the nation. I mean, the continent, and then the big boys just come in and set everything up. But at the same time, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If there's a proper regulatory framework, let outsiders come in, set up factories, employ your people to make the things that your people need, and in the process, their skills transfer. So that's not a bad thing if they come in and set up factories and then they employ your direct people. That's actually a win-win, because eventually what's going to happen is the indigenous people are eventually, if they're smart, and this is what happens in Nigeria a lot, when MTN came in with the cell phones, it wasn't too long before you had Glow, which was a whole Nigerian-owned company doing the same thing that these foreigners were doing at the same level. And it wasn't long before companies were like Etisalat were getting purchased, majority shareholders were ending up being Nigerians. So it's not bad for multinationals to come in and build a factory. What's bad is for multinationals to set up factories in their home nations and flood your country with their goods, therein making you just a consumer. And on the other end, you're just merely exporting unfinished goods, not adding any value. The problem with Africa is that Africa isn't poor. Africa just doesn't add value to its wealth.
Brother Lamine, go ahead.
How you doing, Lamine?
Hey, Ebube. How you doing? Hi, Dynast.
Happy New Year.
Invited me. Yeah, Happy New Year. Thank you. This is an interesting conversation. I've been waiting for Dynast to actually, initiate this. So I've got a couple of questions. I'll make it short because I'm guessing soon people are going to flood the chat rooms, probably, just asking questions as well. So, I mean, I'm interested to see how this will affect, the cost of flights between African countries, because it's kind of ridiculous. Like, if you think about it, that it might be cheaper to travel from any African country to the UK as opposed to between African countries. That is.
Let me. So in East Africa, it's affordable. So traveling throughout East Africa by plane is fine. West Africa, it's a hot mess. Like it's crazy in West Africa. Like literally, for me to get from Sierra Leone, Freetown, to Cotonou, ticket was like almost $1,000.
Whoa.
The cheapest ticket from Freetown to like Accra. So the major hubs in West Africa, Lomé, Togo, because that's like Ethiopian Airlines main hub in West Africa. Abidjan, you got Accra, you got Lagos, then you got Dakar. But it's very regional. So if I'm in Freetown, like getting to even Guinea Conakry, which is right next door, like tickets are like $500 for like a 30-minute flight. In a lot of cases, you're better off just driving. And getting from like Dakar, Senegal to Banjul, Gambia, like tickets like almost $400.
Thank you. That's the point. Actually, I'm from the Gambia. I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like when I before like there were flights from other parts of the world directly to Gambia, right? I used to take flights to Senegal, Dakar, So what I would do, I would take a local car, right? Because I couldn't justify taking like you said, $400 plane just to fly from neighboring country like
Right.
Senegal to the Gambia. So I used to take like local cars and just do that. So I'm actually very interested to see like if that cost gets cut down. I mean,
Well,
for example,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. And we have to look at Alan Onyema, for example, with Air Peace. Are you familiar with Air Peace?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just recently flew. They have now a direct flight from Nigeria to Jamaica.
oh, okay, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and you have to remember, Africa was never meant to be connected. That's not how Africa was supposed to be. That's the key thing to remember is that the infrastructure, Africa's purpose was never to be connected. Its main purpose was to merely export resources from these newly formed countries to the countries that formed them. So now we're talking about a departure from its original purpose. So the same question you're asking, yeah, why is it so difficult? Is because there's really no infrastructure between the nations. So now that infrastructure, for example, flights, right? What's the airline that's supposed to really be the regional airline of West Africa?
Well, so you have a Sky, which is a subsidiary of Ethiopian Airlines, and you have AWA, which is Africa World Airlines, and then of course you got like Eric Air and Air Peace. You know, they're in the mix somewhat.
Those are in the world of aviation. Those guys are babies.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what we have. It's just it's real. It's early. It's good that it started. It's good that it started though. But right, it's growing, but with the African free trade, the whole point is that African companies are going to be given preference. Now we'll see if that extends to airlines to say, hey, look, whatever you need to be able to have a direct flight, let's have it. And then we also have to ask how many people are actually utilizing that per day? Like, what's the actual air traffic?
Dude, you'll be shocked there, Ebube. Like these flights I get on regionally, and I'm like, who's able to afford these tickets? These flights are full.
Like, well, here's the thing: the flights are full because once again, they're limited, right? So if you only have one flight, it's always going to be full, right? But now, for someone to say, you know what, I should have two flights. Is there enough? What they're asking is there enough demand to justify me putting in 2 times the investment, or 3 times the investment, or 4 times the investment, or 5 times the investment? And hopefully people are starting to see, yeah, there's a lot of money. For example, look at Air Peace and how they're expanding. At this pace, it's going to be really easy to just directly fly between almost every state capital, starting in West Africa and then eventually Africa. But it'll take Africans to be able to bridge that gap. The European airlines aren't necessarily interested in bridging that for us. And until we as Africans step up and bridge that gap, like you said, it's going to be very expensive. But what you've just identified and Dynas has identified is that, hey, these flights are full.
That's quite interesting.
One second. With that being said, Ebube, you know finally the new international terminal, Murtala Muhammad, is opening up this year. God, thank you, golly! I can't wait to land in the new terminal because
it's clean and nice.
Is that in Nigeria or
in Nigeria, in Lagos? Yeah, the new terminal is finally supposed to open this year. I wish I could be at the ribbon cutting. I've been waiting for that for years. So finally,
Omo Niger.
Omo Niger, yes.
They heard your cries, man. They heard your cries.
Thank God. Yeah. Because it's just this new beautiful shiny structure. And like when you fly in a Murtala Muhammad, you walk out, you just see this beautiful terminal that's just there. I'm like, why can't I fly into that one? It's just right next door. So finally, yes.
But Landman, you said you had a series of questions. Ask what?
Yeah, this is just food for thought, basically. So I respect your opinions. That's why I'm asking these questions. So, what do you think? Like, what in terms of what we're trying to achieve? What can we learn from the European Union? Because one thing I know, like when I asked the question about flights, I noticed you can travel for dirt cheap between European countries, like just like that. Not all countries, of course, but it's like dirt cheap. So when it comes to that, like what can we? Because I don't think we always have to reinvent the wheel I mean, other people have showed models of how things work. Obviously,
Sure.
Africa is in Europe. That's obvious. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we can't learn anything from Europe, what
Here's
they've
what we
done.
can learn, and it's very simple. Like you said, no need to reinvent the wheel. Think about a continent like a body, right? You have arteries, you have veins, you have tendons, you have skeleton, you have different things, and when everything's circulating well within your body, things are going well. If, for example, nerves, there's damage in your arm and you can't feel your hand, you're not going to be as successful as someone who has full connection. So you have to remember that the infrastructure backbone, the tendons, the skeletal structure of Africa. Here's what you can do. Look at railroad coverage in the world, right? Look at where all the world's major international railroads are. If you look in Europe, you'll see Western Europe is almost covered in rail. You look at America, the East Coast, and you have a couple trans-American, if you will, lines. You look at Asia, it's the same thing. And then you look at Africa, and none of the railways really connect to anything. They all look like they've been broken, right? And so you have to remember that the skeletal structure of Africa wasn't meant for connectivity.
Right.
The first thing they did before they put the European Union together is that they laid the skeletal structure by having the infrastructure that connected everybody. So people could easily move around for work, goods could move around. Before they declared themselves the European Union, they had already set up a system based on the infrastructure that connected everybody. So what we need to do in Africa is first, we need to set it up where there's free movement of goods. And it'll be difficult at first because the infrastructure isn't necessarily there to move between long distances. But we can start with our neighbors within the regions because the regions are connected. So you get strong regions. Whoever look at it like a basketball tournament, right? You have the West African Conference, the North African Conference, the East African Conference, and the Southern African Conference, and maybe the Central African Conference. Now, the champion out of all those conferences is going to go against the other champions from the other conferences. And once you've gotten successful within your region, you're closing the gap between the workforce and the GDP. And as you close the gap, you generate more revenue, more taxes, more infrastructure, more trade, more taxes, more people are touching money, more people spending money within their same community. And it's like a multiplier effect. So rather than that money going overseas to other nations, it's going to stay within Africa. And when it stays within Africa, it gets to a certain point where we're all regionally connected. Once we're properly regionally connected, we now say, you know what? We see that something in Niger Republic and Chad is really needed in South Africa. It would make sense economically to, for example, build a rail system from Niger through Chad all the way down to South Africa, because what we're moving on it is going to justify the rail line anyway. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So before the European Union became the European Union, they were connected by high-speed rails, regular rails, freight rails, roads, bridges, tunnels, you name it. They were connected. So the skeleton of their body was actually all connected. The only place they kind of excluded were the Slavic countries, Eastern Europe, Russia, because they were under a different system. Some of those nations eventually did come over to the European Union, but the original members, they made sure they were properly connected before they went about declaring themselves any type of union. Now in Africa, we're doing it in a different way, but we're still eventually, that's the ultimate goal, is to connect Africa.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think before I came on, you were mentioning something about like how the Japanese copied like European gun technology, right? Is that
Yes.
So that's actually kind of coincides with what I'm trying to ask, is that like you can see what people are doing. I think actually one thing that stifles us in Africa is that we feel like, because naturally we're very creative, we feel like we gotta just start from scratch. We don't have to. Like we can actually learn from others. Like it's fine when you're down. That's awesome. Like, sorry, not awesome. It's natural to be down at some point. But like, let's use our creativity to see what's working and let's copy that and start from there. Because I see, like, for example, I see things like I don't know, like I'm sure like everybody in this panel has heard like Nigerian kid makes an aeroplane, Nigerian kid
Right.
makes a car, like stuff like that. Imagine that being, made all across the continent. Think about stuff like that, that kind of expertise. Let's say, for example, South Africa has a need for car makers, and then they have access to the Nigerian kids that are making cars, that kind of thing. That's where I'm trying to get to. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Dynast. Yeah, thank you so
Let me,
much.
no problem, brother. Thank you. And guys, if you want to call in, again, send me an email, uhuru@searchforwho.com or uhuru@searchforwho.com. We'll take 2 more callers. So if you want to call in and ask a question, uhuru@searchforwho.com. Go ahead and call in, ask your question, and we'll do our best to try and answer everyone. Let's see here. See what else we got here in the chat room. Oh, wait, that's not me. So with this free trade area, how's that going to affect the Chinese? Like, what role were they playing that?
Good question. So now this is putting one long term. This is going to force China to have to deal with Africa with Africa having a slight position of power, right? When you now unify all of Africa into one particular policy, you're basically raising the floor for everybody. That's long term. In the short term, it appears China is actually doing what a lot of other nations aren't doing. What they're saying is, all right, what we're going to do is, if it's going to be harder to bring things in that were made in China, what we'll do is we'll change our business model to building factories all over the African continent. Now, that could be good, that could be bad. It's all in how strong the regulatory institutions are for those businesses that are coming into your nation, because you don't want them to come in with a lot of economic muscle and start to control the politics. Because if you're not careful, the economics can control the politics of a nation. There's 2 levels of control in every nation: political and economic. If you're not careful, if the politics don't have control over the economics will dominate the politics, because money will dominate politics. Politics is just a position of authority. It's not real power per se. The real power is in those who hold the currency. They tell those in positions of power, authority, if you will, what to do. So power trumps authority. So now when someone comes in, you want to make sure you set up a strong regulatory framework to be able to contain this to the point where you're getting the benefit, but you're still maintaining control over your particular country. So it appears that there's a lot of free trade zones. It seems like certain companies are saying, all right, well, what we'll do is we'll just set up a Toyota factory where it's assembled. That's why right now car assembly is really blowing up in Africa. You got Ghana and Nigeria really moving ahead with that and saying, look, we're going to be assembling these cars. So, for example, Toyota, Peugeot, a lot of these companies would go into Nigeria, set up factories, send in the raw materials, have them assembled. And you have to remember that there's a certain threshold at which something has to be, certain number of steps have to be done in that country for it to be considered from that country.
Right.
Meaning that you can't just send in a car, they put a stamp on it saying made in Nigeria, and they're saying now it's complete because it wasn't finished because it didn't have the stamp. No. There's certain processes that are demanded to be done within the country, which is good because now you're creating a whole industry within a country of car manufacturing or car assembly, depending on how far back in the assembly chain they go. And now that's going to lead to a skills transfer, because now you're essentially training a whole generation of people to be able to assemble cars. So now it may get to a point where in a certain country, I know that I can set up a car manufacturing assembly plant because there's just so many of these that are successful in the country. Therefore, there's a large pool of people who have the skills I'll need to make that business or that factory successful.
Guys, hit the like button. Please hit that like button. And I sent the link out to a couple people, so I'm waiting for you guys to click on that link and hop on. Like I said, we'll take a couple more callers before we close out. Again, tour April 21st to the 30th, Sierra Leone. Come and join us. Come and enroll. We are going to have a great time. Oh, Ebube, this is kind of off topic, but it's kind of on topic. African Union passport. Do you know anything about that? I know they've been talking. In fact, they were saying that's going to roll out this year or maybe next year. So, you have any intel on that?
Well, there are levels of passports, meaning that there are certain passports that only diplomats hold. Right. There are certain passports that anyone can hold. So essentially, from my understanding, it's first going to be rolled out as a diplomatic passport for people.
Well, it's already out as a diplomatic passport, African Union passport.
Yeah, but I'm not sure they're opening it up to the general populace just yet. I thought there was still a rollout schedule for that for the general public to be able to just get an African Union passport.
Right. Yeah, but so diplomats, and I think if you're doing, depending on what type of business you're doing, you could get an African Union passport. So,
which is a great thing.
Akon says his passport doesn't work. I don't know what you mean by that. Guys, again, hit that like button, and please, I sent the link out to a couple people and waiting for you to call in. Let's see here. Damian Walton, I just sent you the link.
And someone raised a very interesting point, which is going to be a good thing. When the textile industries get back to where they need to be, to an extent, I don't like when I go to Africa and I see people wearing obvious knockoffs that were made in China of American clothing.
Do they know that that's a knockoff? Because it's just everywhere.
It's like the Gucci has CH in it, you know?
Yeah.
And I always think you would look so much better in just a normal kaftan that your grandfather wore than what you have on presently. So another opportunity is that if the textile industries can take off, that would be great because it would really cut down on that.
Let me read this super chat. Can we use this like China did when the West needed their market for trade to have mutual technology transfer from the West or China to Africa?
Well, it's like I said, this is just an opportunity. It's how Africa uses this opportunity. So yes, could we? Yes. Will we? I'm not sure. I hope that we do, but I'm not sure. I'm not completely sure, but we could. Yeah, definitely. It's all about leverage. Hey, Joel, I think you might have to play back. If you're watching the stream, go ahead and mute it or turn it off.
Okay, sorry, guys. Let me just do that right now.
Perfect. Yeah, if we have the leverage, if we have the market, and we have a strong unified policy, and we force them to say, you know what, this is what's going to happen, then that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Damien, go ahead, bro.
How y'all doing today?
Good.
Brother, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I just had a couple questions for Ebube. As like a young African American out here in America, how does the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, what benefits would that bring to us out here in our community? That's really the question.
You know what I'm searching for now? The African Trade Observatory, I believe is the name of it. The African Trade Observatory, where you can essentially look at what nations are trading. And this is something you can go online. This will be like public record. And this will be a new source of, there's going to be millionaires made off of this observatory, where you can look at what nations are going to keep track of. Here's what we're importing. Here's what we're exporting. Here's what we need. So now let's say you realize that, there's a lot of item X in Nigeria that's going fallow. And there's a huge need for it outside of West Africa. Now, the person that's able to partner with a Nigerian firm. So as a young African American, for example, if you wanted to do something in Nigeria, of course, the company is going to have to be based in Nigeria, but it doesn't mean that partners can't come from outside. Right. So now you as someone in the diaspora, it would be best to partner with somebody here in America that is Nigerian that can partner with somebody back on the ground. Okay. That would give you the best bet. That would give you the best connection. So you partner with that person and say, hey, look, item X, if we can go ahead and get some land, set up a small processing plant, and figure out a way to get this to South Africa or Angola or Kenya from Nigeria, we can get this thing in tariff-free. And currently, here's how much it's being purchased for. It's basically just filling a need. Now, it may take a lot of capital or may not take a lot of capital. It depends on what the items are.
Okay. And my next question for you was, so I run a social media e-commerce company. It's called Continental, and the problem that I'm having right now is marketing my platform to, West African nations and Africa in general. What do you believe is the best way for me to, break through to those markets, get people to see what we're doing out here with the platform?
Well, first off, you have to ask about access. If, for example, someone in Togo wanted to access your platform, could they?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a couple users in Jamaica. We have a user in Malawi. But what I'm struggling to do is really just, get people aware of what we're doing, because we created a platform.
What you can do. Here's what you do. Depending on what the platform usage is, here's something. All right, I'll just talk about Nigeria because Nigeria is the largest market. You got 200 million people.
Right.
So now, a popular thing to do in Nigeria is, if you're on social media, look, you reach out to a couple influencers. You reach out to a couple guys and say, hey, look, how much do you normally take for an endorsement? It's going to cost you to market, but to market to any audience is going to cost, unless you have a larger, there's another way to do it. But if you have access to a larger market that keys into your demographic, you tie in directly to that larger market. So, for example, if there's a concert or something, you sponsor the concert, you put your stuff all over the place, have the artist shout it out to the people, and create a buzz around it. That's one way to do it, right? But either way, you're gonna have to spend some money, or you're going to have to create an attraction where enough people look for free, which is a lot. It's a little bit more difficult than just spending money,
right?
If it's worth it, you're gonna have to pay the cost. So what I would do if I were you, depending on what it actually is I'd reach out to potential brand influencers in Nigeria on social media, talk to them, say, hey, how much would you charge? If it's a comedian, what type of skit can you put together? And here's what we have for you financially. Lead with the bag. You contact them. You say, hey, look, I'm looking to spend some money, not too much, of course. I'm just a startup, but as I grow, you can grow.
Right.
And dollars are dollars. You're here in this country. You can realize that you can get a lot of stuff for a little money in other places. So money that you might not think is big money might be worth it in certain other countries. Now, what does the platform do? Like, just briefly in a sentence, what's the purpose? I'll ask this. What problem does it fix?
The problem that it fixes is, the problem of, connectivity. A lot of Africans in and out of the diaspora, we connect with each other on platforms that aren't owned by our people. So I wanted to create a platform that will allow us to, sell products and services, but also be like a Facebook where we could, talk about our day, upload our music. We even have a piece in there where we can do little votes like.
Well, let me ask you a question. I can already, for example, there's WhatsApp, there's Instagram, Facebook, where I can reach anybody anywhere in the world. What benefit are you bringing? Because if it's just merely, hey, this is owned by somebody within the culture, that's not enough. You have to bring something that'll make people say, you know what, this is just a better product and it's owned by someone within the culture, right? Because unless you have a strong code of conduct within that culture where they only spend money with their culture, so all you have to do is just bring a comparable product, but that's not the environment that you find yourself in, unfortunately. Hopefully that changes, but that's not the current prevailing culture. The culture is to go with what's efficient, as opposed to going with the fact that it's owned by someone within the culture. So you're going to have to figure out what benefit to the end user that it being owned by you gives them.
Well, I believe, with the coming of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, I think that, that will have like a ripple effect on these communities out here that we call African. So hopefully within the next couple of years, we do see, more Black dollars being circulated in these Black communities. So I just wanted to, create this platform. So when that happens, we already have that platform that we can just move to, because when COVID started and everything happened with George Floyd, there was a big, thing going on, buy black, buy black, buy black. But there was no platform for us to just buy black products, go in there and find black users and black businesses and just support black. We had to go through like Instagram or Facebook and then use like PayPal and then use all these platforms just to support each other.
What I'm going to say is this: is that you have to have a competitive advantage, which just makes you better. So I'd say focus on that, because your biggest issue is going to be user adoption. You can have a great app, and if nobody is using it, then that app is useless, because it has to be useful, meaning that I'm going to see it and I'm going to use it. So what I would focus on you is getting people to use it. That's just marketing. That's all just marketing. You got to figure out how to market this thing. You got to put together a budget, and you got to come to people. For example, like if you wanted to extend it to Africa, you got to reach out to these guys and girls and say, hey, look, here's what I got. I want you to market it. And then you keep a record of how many users you have. You have a database. Make sure you're looking at your databases, your spreadsheets, and before and after. So you're going to spend the next 3 to 4 months or however long your campaigns are going to be. And you're going to say, does this work? Because at the end of the day, it's about numbers. I spent $7,000 on marketing this quarter, and I got 10,000 new users. So now I know, all right, I paid about 80 cents per new user. Was that a worthwhile campaign, or was it not? If you spend that same 7,000 and you get 70, you know that you overspent, because that user probably isn't going to spend $100 worth of using your service to justify you marketing, unless you're going to now turn your platform into something that's large enough where advertisers say, you know what, let's pay him money to advertise because he has this many eyeballs. So I would say that your biggest issue per se is marketing. You got to come up with a marketing plan. Depending on what your budget is, there's whole consultant firms that do just this. This isn't my expertise. It's just something I understand a little bit about. I have developed applications, so I understand a little bit about that. I do understand marketing. But what I would say to you is that that's what you got to figure out is user adoption, how to get people to use your product. Doesn't matter how great your product is or if it's black owned or not, if nobody's using it. And then you have to ask yourself, why would anybody use this? Right? Ask yourself, why would anybody use this? Like Instagram, I got it on my phone already. eBay, I got it Amazon, I got all those already. Why would I use yours? Right? So that's the question. You got to have that succinctly. Here's why you should use mine.
Okay. That's perfect. And yo, Dynast, I love your channel, bro. Been supporting you for a minute, man. Appreciate you having me on, bro.
No problem, bro. Thank you.
Ebube. It's love,
no
guys.
problem, brother. Thank you, brother. Thank you for the support, man. And Damien, email me. Damien, email me again. Well, I got your email. Email me or send me your phone number, Damien. I'd like to learn more about your app. All right, Darren, we're going to go ahead and close it out with you, brother. Darren, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Yeah, there you go. Oh, okay. That's my shirt. That's the everybody. You have the African shirt. Go to ilaamir.com and grab your shirt. I'll go ahead.
And get your books too, by the way.
And get the books too.
I just put one in my cart from Amazon.
Thank you.
Right on. Hey, question, you guys. We all know that every great nation in this world, or that has become a great nation, and I'm talking about financially and whatnot, and controlling resources and whatnot throughout the world, have always not only had great armies, but they had great education and not only teaching, but indoctrinating their kids to lead the future. Are there any countries right now? I would assume that there are. Hopefully it's probably Ghana, Nigeria, and whatnot. Are there any countries right now that are working on their kids from kindergarten, from preschool, first grade, and actually starting to implement what is going on in Africa, having the biggest population, the biggest world human capital that we're going to see, over the next 20 to 100 years, possibly maybe longer? Is there anybody indoctrinating these children on how to do business and how to navigate and work with other African nations to make sure? So you got presidents coming out of Nigeria, presidents out of Ghana. Are they doing anything in the school programs to make sure that these children implement this in these programs like Nazi Germany did with their kids, or like America still does with their kids, to tell them they have the greatest country? Is that any of that being done now?
All right, to answer your question, yeah, definitely. And that touches on a point of indoctrination and propaganda. Now, when people hear propaganda, they think about it in the negative, but propaganda is neither good nor bad. It just means that this particular, what I'm telling you has a particular purpose, and I want you to get something from it at the end. So almost anything can be propaganda. So to an extent, you want to make sure that you're in control of the propaganda, because if you're not, rest assured that someone else is going to control the propaganda within your community. So yes, of course, there's tons of places that are indoctrinating African youth on what they need to do in Africa. Now, the other issue too is you have the cultural indoctrination. Some of the best businessmen and women never went to the inside of university. They went through the traditional, ethnic, if you will, schools on how to do business. Some of the best traders in Nigeria, for example, they never went to high school. Many of them dropped out of high school to start doing business because business was the culture that they were taught. So you have some of the richest people didn't go through the formal walls of education because they realized that that's just going to turn me into an accountant, into somebody who is looking for work as opposed to creating work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do an apprenticeship. There's a lot of indigenous apprenticeship. Most jobs in Nigeria, for example, are informal apprenticeships. If your uncle has this business, he's making a few million naira every month, he's going to train you and the rest of your nephews and everybody else in that very same business. And then at the end of maybe a 3 or 4 year training, he's going to give you enough money to go off and start your own, and you're going to go ahead and continue that business. So you were trained in it, and you have a working system, you know how to make money. So it's not really through the schools in a lot of senses. The schools really turn you more so into workers. A lot of the people who are really, and not to put down, the university systems or anything like that, but in regards to raw business, you don't necessarily need school to learn raw business. Maybe high finance, if you want to categorize that as business, potentially. But if it's just basic business and understanding the principles of buy low, sell high, and the mechanics behind the actual importing and exporting, that's definitely being taught.
Yeah, but you still have a whole thing where, I mean, this whole thing is ultimately about capitalism. Which country is going to do what and who we're going to keep out. And I mean, I agree with all that, but we all know that you still got 90% of all the people. They're not cut out to necessarily be business people. They're not going to own these companies. They're going to still need people to work for these business owners that are going to be coming up and taking advantage of the African Free Trade Agreement. And they're going to be those ones who own those companies that may produce chocolate. But you're still going to need somebody to run it and do the accounting. And if, I'm thinking if you don't have your people, or if we don't figure out a way to make sure that our children are indoctrinated into doing it for Africa, the African way, instead of running across overseas, still trying to go get educations, or going into these big international schools that are teaching you how to think like the British or like the French or whatever the case. I'm just hoping, I don't know, but I'm just hoping, what we're saying here, I'm hoping it translates over to education, because like I said, you're still going to have
the issue in Africa isn't education. That's you'd be surprised how many educated graduates we have looking for jobs. So education's there. Yeah. You have tons of lawyers, tons of accountants, tons of engineers. Yeah. You name it. Africans even come over to this country and get overeducated. The problem isn't people with degrees in Africa. The problem is this, and this goes back to the original issue. The economy isn't large enough to absorb all the accountants. The economy isn't large enough to absorb all the civil engineers. So you have somebody with a civil engineering degree driving a bus.
Nowhere to work.
Why? And you have to ask yourself why. Well, because there aren't enough engineering firms that need that person's particular skill. So the problem isn't education. The problem is that the economy isn't large enough and robust enough because we don't add enough value. Once you add value, you alleviate 90% of your problems, because you create a robust economy where everybody can find themselves. Our problem is this: we did everything you just said without expanding the economy. So you go to Nigeria, you'd be shocked at how nice some of the universities are. Some of the universities.
I wouldn't be shocked. I'm very. As a matter of fact, I think people in Africa. You meet people that are here in the States, and their education is I mean,
I'll tell you this.
butt here in America.
In Nigeria, you learn multiplication and division at 3 years old.
Yeah.
So you got educated people, but the problem is you'll also see a lot of people wearing suits under the hot sun, going from one, hoping to get one job interview, going to the next, running around with their CV in their hand. It's not that they're not educated. There's tons of educated people. That's why when you add value and you create a robust economy, you're going to see movement really quickly because everything's there. It's just the economy isn't where it needs to be. If you ask most African graduates what their biggest issue is, it's the economy's not large enough to create enough jobs for everybody because, like I said, if your economy is essentially exporting cocoa, how many accountants does that economy really need?
Wow.
So what happens is that you have a lot of people who say, you know what, I'm better off overseas with this degree where the economies are large enough to handle this. So the problem isn't education, but the problem is that we're not adding enough value to the economy.
And I don't want you know, I don't want it to come off as I'm thinking about education because, you know, I believe most people in different parts of Africa and people that I know from different parts of Africa are some of the most educated people I know. But I'm making sure, and when I say education, I don't want to skip the word, the indoctrination. Like you said, propaganda, people look at it as negative, like you said, but it's really not. And I think
everybody's properly,
it's crucial.
Most Africans are properly indoctrinated to love their country. There's that, you know, there's pockets here and there, but most Africans are pretty patriotic. I'd say Nigerians, for example, are very patriotic.
Oh yeah,
Nigeria is the country that you know. So indoctrination's there. Once again, the problem is the economy is just not large enough to absorb everybody, and because there's a lot of missed opportunity, a lot of talented people that aren't put in proper positions. And if talented people aren't put in proper positions, the nation as a whole isn't competitive. And if you're not competitive, then, you know, it's like you have to look at it like this. I went to high school in this country, and there were certain schools where they had a lot of talented guys, talented running backs, talented wide receivers. But you go to their practice field, the patches of grass, they were essentially practicing in dirt. It was low. Their uniforms were not. You know, and then you go over across the tracks to another school, and it's like they got state-of-the-art Nike training facilities, and it's just they're just in a better position. Everybody wants to go there. So the problem isn't the talent; the problem is that everything else outside of the talent isn't together. So Nigeria, Africa as a whole, as a large, teeming, talented pool of people that, if given the proper chance, infrastructurally, policy-wise, Africa would take off tomorrow. So
I'm loving it, and I believe that. I'm really happy about this. I'm really happy, and I'm really excited about the whole thing because, well, it's about time. It's time for us to take it all back.
And once again, this is just an opportunity. It's all about how it's used. And you have to remember, opportunities get squandered every day. This isn't a slam dunk. All this is saying, you know what? We're going to put Africa first. We're going to prioritize Africans. We're going to make it so that you'll get in trouble if you don't let another African nation bring their goods in.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's just an opportunity, and we'll see how Africa moves forward with the opportunity. Like I said, this isn't something to get overexcited about. This is something to guard and ensure that this opportunity is used properly.
Right on. Appreciate you guys, man. Y'all enjoy the night.
No problem.
Let's talk about this again. Maybe we can get some more folks on early in the day, some business folks, and maybe they'll join in.
And this isn't a one event thing. This is something that's going to be continual with this Africa Free Trade Agreement. This is something that there's going to be updates all the time because it's evolving. It's morphing and evolving. In 6 months, this thing could be the best thing since sliced bread, or it could be a wasted opportunity. So this is something to actually monitor. It's not a one and done.
Absolutely. Hey guys, you guys have a good night, man.
I appreciate it, brother.
Appreciate it.
All right, Ebube, we'll go ahead and close out. Anything else you'd like to share at closing?
Oh man, it's just a great discussion. Happy New Year's to everybody. This is going to be everybody's year. Just you got to make that statement a true statement. Also, make sure you go to Up Close and Center and subscribe. I got some new content coming out this week. And I got a few more things coming out in pretty quick succession. I've been working on a few documentaries. But that's all I got to say, brother.
Man, Ebube, thank you for joining us, man. Guys, make sure you go subscribe to Up Close and Center. Please go subscribe to Brother Ebube's page. Guys, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, family, hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. Peace. Here we go. Ebube for president of Africa.
Why not? Let's do it.
Why not? Why not? You got my vote. Why not? All right, family. Peace.